TCU has an underrated transfer portal haul that is flying under the radar.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That's right, Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. I'm your host, Steven Simcox. I've been covering TCU athletics for the past 12 years. We're going to talk about TCU baseball today. They're kicking off their final series of the regular season against Utah. Which TCU sport will be the next one to break through and win a national championship? We hope it's football. Tennis has a chance to do it. Actually, this weekend, they start in the Elite Eight on Friday afternoon against Virginia. But we begin today with TCU football in their offseason. TCU had a very underrated offseason, I believe. Bill Conley wrote an article ranking the offseason of every Power Four team. He did it by conference. I like Bill Conley. I think he does a good job of covering college football on a national level and not just focusing in on the Blue Bloods. But in the Big 12, he had Texas Tech at number one, which is not surprising. Tech has had a very flashy offseason. They've added a lot of talent in the transfer portal. They're throwing a lot of NIL money around. Good for them. TCU has been pretty quiet, and the Frogs come in at sixth. And honestly, I was pleasantly surprised they were that high because I feel like most people that don't understand where TCU is from a roster construction standpoint and the way they finished last year will just say, well, they didn't really add much of anything. They were an 8-4 team. They lost some starters. They didn't add a ton of players. What is their season going to look like? But Bill Conley said this about TCU and their offseason. When he talked about what went wrong, this was really more about the season itself than the offseason. After a bumpy 3-3 start, Horned Frogs had a strong finish, bouncing back from a 5-7 year in 2023. They must replace 11 starters from a solid transfer-heavy senior class that yielded 2 top 100 draft picks in Jack Bech and Savion Williams. But the Frogs did not lose much of the portal beyond James Brockermeyer, their starting center, and backup quarterback Haas Haney, who transferred to Oklahoma State. When he talked about what went right, the main thing he discussed was Josh Hoover staying at TCU. And there was an interesting nugget here. We know about the Tennessee situation. Tennessee, after Nico Amaliava left, they reached out to Josh Hoover's people. They said, hey, we got a starting quarterback role that's open here. His people said, you know what? No, thank you. We're happy here at TCU. But Bill Conley says that multiple schools reached out about the availability of Josh Hoover, but he stayed put. He'll be getting the help of Joseph Manjack and Jordan Dwyer in the portal. He also talked about Kavorian Barnes, who comes over from UTSA as a running back. And that was really it. Aside from that, he talked about the retention of the roster. So I'll say this. I agree with him that the continuity of this team is the main selling point for why TCU is going to be good this year. The coaching staff has stayed together. The roster has stayed together. But I think while it's been quiet and while it's been a pretty small, from a numbers perspective, a small haul in the transfer portal, the more I look at the way they attacked it and the way they approached it, I really like what they added. They went and got Jordan Dwyer and Joseph Manjack. Sonny Dykes said before the season was over, when he was asked about what his priorities were in the transfer portal, while myself and many others might be saying, you know what, we got to beef up this offensive line. That's the main thing. He said, look, we need to go get wide receivers. Our talent at wide receiver was so good last season. We have an opportunity to go sell that to transfer portal recruits to say, hey, look at what we did with Savion Williams. Look at what we did with Jack Bech. 2 guys before the year that weren't really, well, Jack Bech, in Jack Bech's case, he was not on the NFL draft radar that much. Savion was because of his physical ability, but they got both of those guys. They were able to raise their stocks in a big way with the season that they had. So they go get Jordan Dwyer, had a huge season at Idaho. They get Joseph Manjack, who's going to be a very steady presence to pair with Eric McAllister. They got some young guys that they like. And then defensively, Ansel Dinboo, who had a great season on the defensive line at Washington State, and they needed more depth on the defensive line. Kavorian Barnes, I'm not as bullish as Bill Conley is on that addition, but I'll say this. I think adding Kavorian is filling a very specific role, okay, which you need, which is we need a short yardage back. We need somebody who can come in and get hit at the line of scrimmage and churn their legs and fall forward for 3 or 4 yards. That can convert a 4th and 1. That can convert a 3rd and 2. That can get you some tough yards in situations where you need to bleed the clock. I think Kavorian Barnes can do that. I feel like that's a good fit for him. Elijah Jackson, a veteran corner coming over from Washington. He was a starter on that team that played for a national championship. Kamorian Pimpton's a very interesting prospect, tight end, but you can move him all over the formation because of his build and his athleticism. I think he could play inside wide receiver at times. Kylan Jackson from LSU, former 4-star recruit, big-time safety. And what I love the most about what they did, a lot of these guys have multiple years of eligibility. If you don't get everything out of Kamorian Pimpton this season, it's okay. You got 1 more year to do it. And he can fill a role this season because you got to do like DJ Rogers, who should be ready to step in and be a starter. You have some other players who can take snaps as well. And so that allows you to have some versatility with Kamorian as a tight end / playmaker. You got some young offensive linemen that did some good things at the FCS level. Dylan Kinney, Rasheed Jackson. I don't think either of those guys are going to be asked to start this year, and that's okay. They can get acclimated with what the program is. They can get acclimated with Big 12 football. And then the next year, possibly those are dudes that are starting for you. So there's possibilities here beyond just 1 season. And there's a good mix of like Jordan Dwyer was a dude everybody wanted. He had visits scheduled to Ole Miss. He had a visit to Washington where he was offered a lot of money. And I know that for a fact because the Locked On Washington host messaged me after he committed. And he was like, hey, you got any insight on what happened there? Because I know Washington gave him a pretty enticing offer from a financial perspective. The way they've approached the spring portal window. Again, Michael Thiessen, All-American FCS linebacker, gives you some depth there. Doesn't have to start, but he can be a rotational piece for you. Ryan Yates, a safety from Cal, started his career at TCU. Trey Watson, your new coach, has some familiarity with them. And oh, by the way, your coaching staff has continuity, but you made some good additions within the coaching staff as well. You go get Trey Watson from Cal, who did a really nice job there. And then Randy Clements comes over on the offensive line as an assistant offensive line coach. And I think that's going to be one of the more underrated positive additions for this team. We've talked a lot about how that position group needs to improve. They have to be better on the O-line. So you bring in somebody with a ton of experience, who's coached everywhere, who's been with Kendall Briles before, has a ton of familiarity with that system, can be a sounding board for him, can be another set of eyes to say, hey, let's figure out how to scheme things up in the run game so that we can have more success. What are our strengths? Kendall Briles said earlier this offseason or in the spring, he was like, we want to simplify this run game, meaning instead of running a bunch of concepts, our goal has been let's figure out what we do well and focus on that. And so Clements can be a piece of that now moving forward. It's not flashy. It's not loud, but I think TCU's done a really good job of adding to this roster and filling in the roster holes that they had so far during this offseason. And there's still time if they want to add some more players. But I think for the most part, we're seeing this team in full. When we come back, which program will be the next TCU one to break through and win a national title? That's coming up next year on Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Okay, so one of the things that I've learned as an adult, when I was at TCU, I didn't even have a box spring or a bed frame. I just slept with a mattress on the floor, and I was fine with that. It's not like a sad story. I just mean I was never somebody who really cared about furniture that much. When I got married, my wife did have opinions on those things, and so I was like, okay, babe, do whatever you need to do. I've learned that furniture is very expensive. Did you guys know this? You probably think I'm dumb. That's okay. But it is. That's something that I've learned throughout my life as I've gotten older and as I've, owned my own home now and started to build it with my family. That's why I love WayFair. If you haven't given WayFair a try, check it out today. And it's not just inside the house. That patio, that backyard, you need a place to sit this summer when it's 120 degrees outside. We're getting a little bit of taste of that now in May if you're in the Texas area. But they have a massive selection of outdoor essentials that make it easy to transform any space into your ideal summer setup. From comfy conversations to sleek dining tables and outdoor decor, they've got it all, and at prices that fit your budget. You can get a brand new patio dining set and some string lights from WayFair to help extend that outdoor space. You'll love the mix of styles that they have to offer. Shop a huge selection of outdoor furniture online this summer. Get outside with WayFair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's WayFair.com. WayFair. Every style, every home. Give WayFair a try today. And that's wayfair.com. Give your home the refresh it needs. Get that backyard ready for the summer so you can entertain people. Do it with WayFair. So a few years ago, I asked this question on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I put a poll out there. And I said, hey, what TCU team is going to break through and win a national championship first? And I realized at the time that I did this, the Rifle team had won a few national titles. Their total national titles are 4. Their most recent one was in 2024. So the Rifle team's done an outstanding job. They've gotten it done. Beach volleyball won a national title a few weeks ago. Men's tennis won a national title last year. They're hoping to defend that title this season. David Roditi's done an outstanding job with that program. So it's happened now. And at the time I asked that question, the options I gave were men's tennis, baseball, football, and women's soccer. And in that moment, women's soccer was coming off an Elite Eight run. And they were like right there knocking on the door of the Final Four. Well, since then, not that they've taken a step back. Eric Bell's program is still really, really good. They're very consistent. They just won a Big 12 championship. But it feels like they're not quite in that upper echelon that they were a few years ago. They've been knocked out in the Sweet 16 a few times. Baseball has been to the College World Series recently. They were in the Final Four a few years back. Of course, they had that great run with Jim Schlossnagle where they went to 4 straight College World Series. Should have won at least one national title in that run. The Coastal Carolina games still haunt me and will forever, or at least until they get it done. But they had some talented teams that were, right there with the best of the best. Right now, I think they're kind of in a similar spot to soccer. They're very good. They have a chance to host. We'll talk about that here in segment 3, to host a regional. And I even saw some discussion on D1 baseball about maybe a top 8 seed. I'm skeptical about that, but they're at least in the conversation. But it feels like they're not quite where they were, back in the glory days under Slosh, where they were so good making all those runs. And then a couple of years ago, they got hot at the right time. And they almost pulled it off and won the whole thing. So now I wonder which program will be the next one to break through. Tennis has a chance to do it this week or this weekend. They can win another national title and make it 2 in a row. Wake Forest will be tough if they get there. Virginia is obviously a really good team. They're in the Elite Eight for a reason. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments. You can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. Which program you think is going to break through next? Women's basketball came to mind when I was thinking about that this morning. Now, Mark Campbell has to prove, and the program has to prove, that last year wasn't just not a fluke, but we snuck up on some people, right? When Haley Van Lith transferred in, that was a huge moment. But I do think it's worth remembering that Haley was coming off a tough season at LSU for her standards. She wasn't the same player there that she was at Louisville. And a lot of the discussion around her in that offseason was like, okay, where is she going to go? to kind of get her swagger back and get her mojo back. And Mark Campbell and that TCU program was a perfect fit for her. And she thrived, and they ended up taking down Notre Dame, making it to the Elite Eight. The Texas game, I think you saw a Texas team that was better than them, but they were in that ball game. It wasn't just a complete rout, right? But the roster's turning over, and now they have to deal with expectations. Olivia Miles comes over from Notre Dame. She was supposed to be the number 2 pick in the WNBA draft. She made the move to TCU specifically because she saw what happened with Haley Van Lith and how it revitalized her career. And she said, you know what? I want to do that too. Marta Suarez from Cal, who had a really good year last year. Clara Silva, 6'7" player from Kentucky. They made an effort to get bigger and taller. Kennedy Basham, 6'7" player from Arizona State. They want more length on the post. Players that can protect the rim, that can block shots. So they went and did that this offseason. But they have to deal with expectations now. I think there's a really good chance they're going to be picked to win the Big 12 in the preseason. They should be a top 25 team. I know Charlie Cream for ESPN doesn't have them there right now, but I think when the dust settles, people will vote TCU in the top 25 to start the year. And they quickly introduced themselves last year. They took down NC State. They took down Notre Dame in that tournament. Had a reality check against South Carolina. But then they ran through the Big 12 regular season with only 2 losses. Beat Baylor 3 times, which for a long time had been, the team in that league. And found a way to win a Big 12 regular season title and a tournament title. But they have to make a leap in the next couple of years if they're going to be that next team. Because you saw it against South Carolina. I think you saw it against Texas to a certain extent. There was a step up in competition and athleticism that they just weren't prepared for. And so you add some transfers along with Donovan Hunter, Taylor Bigby, a player like Maddie Shear, who was injured last year but had a really good career at Kentucky before transferring over to TCU. And your hope is that everything comes together and works out. But I want to know your thoughts. Which team do you think will be the next one to break through? And you can say tennis. I didn't really count tennis just because they won already. They won a title already. I would love for them to do it again. But they got over that threshold and got it done. But which team do you think will be the next one to break through and win a national title? I'd love to hear your thoughts here in the YouTube comments, or you can tweet at me at SimcockSteven. When we come back, TCU baseball has a series against Utah. Last series of the regular season. I'll tell you what the most important thing is from this weekend next. You're on Locked on Horned Frogs, your team every day. So last series of the regular season, TCU cannot technically win a Big 12 regular season title. West Virginia has that pretty much locked up, or not locked up, but at least when it comes to TCU, there's enough separation in the standings there. But they're seeding on the line. They're jumbled up together there with Arizona State and Arizona. They could finish anywhere from second, down to 5th or 6th, depending on what happens in these various series. The Big 12 tournament is single elimination this year. The top 4 seeds get a bye. And if you get a bye, you only have to win 3 games in 3 days to take home the trophy, which is different than it's been in the past. I don't love single elimination when it comes to a baseball tournament, but I do like the idea that it's going to move a little quicker and that teams won't have to play doubleheaders and those kind of things. Frogs, according to D1 Baseball, are back in the hosting conversation. They did project them to host a regional. I've seen some other sites that have had them as a 2 seed. Bottom line is they're right there, but you need to win a series against Utah. Utah's not a very good team. They're 7-20 in Big 12 play, but they are coming off a series win against Arizona. Your starters this weekend, Tommy Lepore tonight, Cademan Parker on Friday, TBA on Saturday. I imagine will be either Mason Brassfield or Trevor Baumler, who've been kind of trading off that third starter role over the last few weeks and through the majority of the year. The most important thing about this weekend, though, is happening tonight. And I'll tell you what it is. Tommy Lepore has to get back on track. he's been outstanding all year long, but his last 2 starts, he has struggled. Against Arizona, not a horrible night. 5 innings, 7 hits, 2 runs, 2 earned, walked 2, struck out 5. I don't think his command was fully there. He had to throw a lot of pitches. They were fouling a lot of balls off. And he didn't, go his typical 6 or 7 innings. But then against Cincinnati, he ends up struggling again. Now, they ended up winning that game last Friday against Cincinnati 17-11 in a crazy ball game, but Tommy wasn't himself. He ended up giving up 5 runs over 4 1/3 innings, 7 hits, did have 11 strikeouts, had 2 walks. Cincinnati hit a couple home runs. It was that kind of weekend. Wind was blowing out at Lupton, which was pretty rare. But this TCU team, they're good, okay? But the way they're constructed, they have some weaknesses that don't tend to translate well to a regional format. The first one is they don't have a lot of pitching depth. Behind Tommy, it's a toss-up, right? Like, Caden Parker's been good at times, but he's been inconsistent. I know part of that is because of the injury, but he's been inconsistent. And then your third starter is TBA just about every weekend. And you're kind of cobbling together the bullpen. And you're really counting on Tommy to go deep into games. Started the year on Saturdays, now he's moved to Fridays. But you're counting on him to go deep into games because you might need Braden Sloan to go 4 innings on a Saturday or on a Sunday. You need some guys to go long from the bullpen on Saturday and Sunday, or in this case on Friday and Saturday, because your starters have struggled and they just haven't been able to eat innings. And the lineup, I think it's gotten better over the year as the year's gone on. Sawyer Stroh-Snyder's been outstanding all year long. Carson Bowen's starting to heat up a little bit. I've liked the addition of Colton Griffin into the lineup. We'll kind of see how they match that up this weekend, if they go with him or if they go with Jack Bell. It depends on the pitching matchup. We'll see what it looks like. But against good pitching, elite pitching, they've had issues scoring runs. And that's what you're going to see in the postseason. But the thing that has been consistent really all year long that I think works in their favor when we talk about playing in a regional, playing in a super, is they have a number 1 starter who can shut down a ball game. Like, he can go 8 innings and throw 115 pitches and give up 2 runs or 1 run. He's done that this year. So tonight against Utah, is he sharp? Is he closer to what he's been throughout the rest of the season? Because if he is, I think TCU has a great chance, especially if they're hosting and playing at home, to break through. And then in a super regional format, if you're able to take game 1 with him on the mound, that's a huge benefit, right? So, yes, Braden Sloan's another piece of this. He needs to continue to get right. Does another starter emerge? Please, this late in the year. Can we have one more starter just emerge as a consistent presence? But to me, the most important thing, what's Tommy look like tonight? Because if he can play at a high level or pitch at a high level, then the ceiling for this team elevates in a drastic way. So I'm watching what he does against Utah. First game is tonight at 6 p.m. Then they play 6 p.m. on Friday and 2 p.m. on Saturday. And that's the end of the regular season. Big 12 tournament starts on Wednesday. Hopefully they have a top 4 seed, and TCU plays on Thursday. And then it's NCAA tournament time. I am very grateful and happy that we're not talking about a team on the bubble, because that's what we were doing last year, and we know that ended poorly. I'll never forget my buddy Jacob Langford texting me. I was at like an indoor play gym with my kids because it was Memorial Day, and I was hanging out with them. And Jacob texted me and said, "Hey, don't waste your time watching the selection show." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And then I looked and I saw it had leaked that TCU wasn't going to end up in the tournament, which was a crazy turn of events. But they're solidly in the field right now. They have a chance to host. They need to take down Utah this weekend and then carry that momentum into the Big 12 tournament. We'll talk about it on Friday. It's Locked On Horned Frogs, your team every day. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're also free and available wherever you get your podcast.